book 2 of Captain Underpants, and this is called Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. This is part 1, and it's the second epic novel by Dav Pilkey. All right. Tra-la-la! Hello. Before you read this book, there's something you should know. So, Harold and I have created this informative pamphlet to fill you in on the details. Please don't let this comic fall into the wrong hands. Top Secret Truth About Captain Underpants by George Beard and Harold Hutchins, who deny everything. Once upon a time, there were two cool kids named George and Harold. We are cool. Me too. They made their own comics about a superhero named Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la! Everybody thought their comics were funny. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Except for their mean old principal, Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. One time, Mr. Krupp was being mean to George and Harold. Blah, blah, blah. So they bought a 3D hypno ring. They hypnotized Mr. Krupp. I will obey. Then they turned him into Captain Underpants. But Mr. Krupp thought he really was Captain Underpants. He jumped out of the window to fight crime. Uh-oh. Tra-la-la! George and Harold tried to stop him, but they had to save the world first. Kaboom. This is the bad guy. When they got back to school, George poured water on Captain Underpants' head. He turned back into Mr. Krupp, but something was wrong. Blah, blah, blah. Because now, for some reason, every time Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, he turns back into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la! So, whatever you do, please don't snap your fingers around Mr. Krupp. Please, 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 don't snap those fingers. This has been a public service announcement from George and Harold, who still deny everything. Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. This says Joe's Furniture. Come in and see our pretty armchairs. Depending on who you ask, you'd probably hear a lot of different things about George and Harold. Their teacher, Mrs. Ribble, might say that George and Harold were disruptive and behaviorally challenged. Their gym teacher, Mr. Meaner, might add that they were in serious need of a major attitude adjustment. Their principal, Mr. Krupp, would probably have a few more choice words to include, like sneaky and criminally mischievous. And, I'll get those boys if it's the last thing you get the idea. But if you ask their parents, they'd probably tell you that George and Harold were smart and sweet and very good-hearted, even if they were a bit silly at times. I'd have to agree with their parents. It says Joe's Furniture, and they're switching it around. What do you think it'll say? Hairy armpits. And remember it said try our armchairs. Or see our armchairs. But even so, their silliness did get them into trouble a lot of time. Get them into a lot of trouble sometimes. In fact, it once got them into so much trouble, they accidentally almost destroyed the whole planet with an army of evil, vicious, talking toilets. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, this story. One fine morning at Jerome Horowitz Elementary School, George and Harold had just gotten out of their fourth grade remedial gym class when they saw a big sign in the hallway. It was an announcement for the second annual Invention Convention. Second annual Invention Convention. Grand prize. George and Harold had fond memories of last year's Invention Convention, but this year's convention was a bit different. The first prize winner got to be principal for the day. "Wow," said George. "Whoever gets to be principal gets to make up all the rules for the whole day, and everybody in the school has to follow those rules." "We have got to win first prize this year," exclaimed Harold. Just then, George and Harold's principal, Mr. Krupp, showed up. He shouted, "I'll bet you two are up to no good." Not really," said George. "We were just reading about this year's contest." "Yeah," said Harold. "We're going to win first prize in the contest and be principals for the day." Laughed Mr. Krupp. "Do you honestly think I'd let you two enter this year's contest after that stunt you pulled at last year's Invention Convention?" George and Harold smiled and thought back to the first annual Invention Convention. Chapter 3, the flashback. That was the flashback noise. Last year's Invention Convention. It was about 1 year earlier, and all of the faculty and students of Jerome Horowitz Elementary School had gathered in the gymnasium for what would later be known as the sticky chair incident. George and Harold stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," said George, "Harold and I have invented something that is guaranteed to keep you all glued to your seats." "Yes," said Harold. "We call it a glue." Mr. Krupp became very angry. "You two did not invent glue," he shouted. He stood up to take the microphone away from Harold, and his chair stood up with him. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed. The school secretary, Miss Anthrope, stood up to help remove Mr. Krupp's chair from his pants. Her chair stood up with her too. Everyone in the gymnasium laughed harder. The other teachers stood up, and you guessed it, they were stuck to their chairs as well. Everyone in the audience howled with laughter. One kid stood up to go to the bathroom, and his chair came up with him also. The audience stopped laughing so hard, they all quickly checked their chairs, and suddenly the laughter stopped completely. Everyone in the whole school was glued to their seats. You see, while it was true that George and Harold had not invented glue, they had invented a new kind of glue. By simply mixing rubber cement with concentrated orange juice mix, they had created a quick-drying, body heat-activated glue. Then they applied this special glue to every seat in the gymnasium except theirs early that morning. Everybody in the gymnasium was glaring at George and Harold and seething with anger. "I've got a good idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" cried George. George and Harold were grinning from ear to ear, remembering their silly invention and the chaos that followed. "Oh, man, that was hilarious," laughed George. "Yeah," chuckled George. Laughed Harold. "Yeah," chuckled George. "It'll be hard to top that this year." "Well, you won't get a chance this year," said Mr. Krupp. He took out a magnifying glass and held it up to the fine print on the sign. "This contest is open to all students except the third and fourth grade. to all students in the 3rd and 4th grades except George Beard and Harold Hutchins. You mean we can't enter the contest? Asked Harold. It's worse than that, laughed Mr. Krupp. You boys can't even attend this year's convention. I'm putting you two in study hall that whole day. Mr. Krupp turned and walked away, laughing victoriously. Ah, rats, said Harold. What are we going to do now? Well, said George, you know the old saying, if you can't join 'em, beat 'em. And that is all for today. And the next day, the next time we read this book, we will read chapter 4, The Invention. All right. Good night. I love you.